So good evening and welcome to the OCC webinar. Tonight it's by Pam Wall. It's a little unusual, this one, because Pam did her live talk last week and her slides weren't working so well last week. So we're going to re-record the whole thing. It was very successful. She gained a whole bunch of avid new disciples, which is wonderful. But we're going to redo just Pam and I tonight so that she's doing her presentation as originally planned. And it's a talk about an amalgam of 3 Atlantic circuits spread over many years, I think 3 or 4 decades possibly. One of them was actually a school run, probably the most exotic school run ever. So Pam Wall, dialing in from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, the legendary cruiser. Go ahead, Pam, please.
Oh, thank you, Simon. I certainly hope that I can get through this without any problems for you again. And welcome to everybody who's come back, and they're going to go on these passages with me again. I really appreciate it, and I think you'll see some different pictures that you'll like, but you'll also probably hear some more stories maybe, and even some repeats of the stories that we had before. But let's get going and come on aboard. And I first of all have to introduce you to the man who made this all possible, Andy Wall. I was just a little girl growing up in Chicago who loved to go sailing. And when I moved down to Fort Lauderdale, I saw Andy walking down a dock and fell in love with him just looking out a window. And thank goodness the two of us spent the rest of his life together sailing our boats. It used to be kind of funny from this picture. This picture was taken actually in Joost van Dyke in the Virgin Islands. And shortly after the picture was taken, the man who took it came up to us and said, "Oh man, your daughter is so cute." So I tell you, Andy looked down at me. He always called me his daughter after that. But anyway, let's move on. This is, I just wanted to introduce you to Andy because he is so important in my life. These are our logbooks. You know, back in the early 70s, when Andy and I were sailing across the Atlantic and other places in little tiny Carronade that I told you about, that I had my honeymoon on, this little 30-foot boat. We had the biggest logbook because we had to write so much in those days because there's absolutely no electronics whatsoever. I mean, everything was DR, of course, and celestial navigation. So I just thought it'd be interesting to see what it used to be like to keep track of where you were. You can see the big log of Carronade and then the 2 separate logs of Kandarik. And of course, these are what have become my treasures to always remember. Everything is handwritten. Andy would always write the passage logs, and I would always write quite much in detail when we were ashore with our children sailing with Kandarik. For those of you who weren't here, Kandarik was our second boat that we built, Freya 39, and you'll see a lot of pictures of her. But first I want to show you a picture that maybe some of you will kind of laugh about. This is the little Carronade. This is the boat that Andy built in Australia, sailed across the Pacific, and then departed from Papeete nonstop down to Cape Horn, rounded Cape Horn in 1967. And the interesting thing about this picture, while it was taken in the Hauraki Gulf in New Zealand, is the man you see steering there is Ron Holland at 17 years old. So Andy always likes to take credit for Ron's wonderful life of designing gorgeous boats by saying he was the first man to take Ron Holland sailing in New Zealand, and of course started the whole thing. This is Andy again. This is on their way south towards Cape Horn. The reason I know it's not after Cape Horn is because the dinghy, the tender, is still on deck. And they took a very, very bad knockdown approaching Cape Horn. And what was left of the dinghy was a bunch of shards on the deck. And of course, there was nothing left of it, so it was gone. But here's Andy flushing the toilet. Not only did we not have electronic navigation on the boat, but we had no toilet. But there it is in his hand. I just thought you'd like to see that. And you can see a little hand there. That's probably either Dave Kearns or Bob Nance hand steered all the way to Fort Lauderdale and hand steered all the way from Fort Lauderdale across the Atlantic and back again on my honeymoon. No autopilots or anything like that. And you can see the little compass down there on the pedestal. I wrote an article in Cruising World magazine. If anybody ever wants to look at the November issue of Cruising World, I wrote an article about that binnacle that was a major force in bringing Andy into my life. Notice also the old 3-strand line. You know, I mean, this is a long time ago. This is in 1967. And of course, there he is with his foot in the toilet and out there bracing himself for his noon position, or his noon sight. And of course, someone is hand steering on their way to Cape Horn. And this is just a picture that I love. Andy, just before they left Australia, bought something that was brand new, an underwater Nikonus camera with film. It had to take film. And Andy used to love jumping in the water with his camera. And here they are, believe it or not, on their way to Cape Horn in the doldrums, coming south from Tahiti. And he jumped in with the camera. And anyone who's been in the doldrums will know that this is the frustration of not having an engine. And here they are making their landfall on Cape Horn. I just wanted to give you some background about how my life started with Andy Wall and Little Carronade. There is a book by Des Kearns called World Wanderer. It's out of print now, but you can get it on places like Amazon and things like that. This tells the story of them sailing down to Cape Horn. Lots of good pictures. And then Des wrote another new book, which just was published. Ernie Godshank, the other night, mentioned that he had just finished reading this book. I had sent it to him. And it's another great book about sailing stories that will just, they're spellbinding. You won't be able to put the book down if you want to get this book, if you like sailing stories. And that's a picture. Look how old it is, of the day we got married. I just thought I'd show you the before and the after. And this is Kandarik, the boat that we did actually 3 Atlantic circles on. We built her from scratch in Petaluma, California. A young Australian named Janet had bought the design from the brothers who had designed the Freya, which was a famous racing boat in the 60s, won the Sydney Hobart race 3 times in a row. And he made a mold to make fiberglass Freyas. And here she is. All these people came to see her coming out of the mold, being lifted out of the mold. And it was a huge, big day. But keep in mind, that is a shell of a boat, And Andy and I spent the next 10 years, both of us working, both of us having children, making this boat a pretty special boat for sailing wherever we wanted to go. There she is. This picture actually was taken at Pittwater in Australia. Flush deck, canoe stern. You see we have a self-steering vane. We carried a windsurfer around the world because the kids loved to windsurf. And that was the first place we ever learned of solar panels. And so we put solar panels on, which were fantastic. And we got a 12-volt refrigerator. That was the greatest thing in the world. And those solar panels kept frozen food in our 12-volt refrigerator. Anyway, she's a wonderful boat. I still have her. She's 48 years old and the joy of my life, pretty much. just to show you the interior, her name is Kandarik. You see the picture on the wall there. The Kandarik is the Aboriginal mythological kangaroo that taught the Aborigines how to dance. I wanted to name the boat the Pamela W. I thought that was much more appropriate, but Andy won. And this is looking forward. We had a pot-bellied stove. There's some hydrangeas on the stove there that must have been taken in the Azores, but in the high latitudes of New Zealand and Australia in the wintertime, and Spain and Portugal in the late fall, that would have a crock pot on it. And I could put a chicken in the crock pot early in the morning, you know, with a can of cream of mushroom soup and carrots and onions and everything. And all day long, the boat would just smell heavenly. And there was always a kettle on the boil for anyone who wanted to come and have tea with us. This is my galley, just so that you can see it. Sink is amidships with hand pumps and foot pumps. And that is a 3-burner kerosene stove. Because Flipper, if you're watching this, you'll remember that you had a gas explosion. And I bet you the reason Andy chose a kerosene stove, because as a young man, he probably read that article and didn't want to use propane or gas, but kerosene. And I love that kerosene stove. It's wonderful. So let's get back to why we're really here. And that's to go from the state of Florida over to Europe and back, the Kandarik Circle, Atlantic Circle. This is just one of the times that we went. This is the time that we had just come home from sailing around the world. And my 2 children tried to go back to real school. Well, they never went to real school except in Tahiti for a year, Australia for a year, and New Zealand for a year. But they didn't like going back to school in America because they were foreigners in their own country. And they went to France to go and finish up their high school and their first year of college. So this is the path that we took from the Bahamas to Bermuda, the Azores, up to Ireland and over to France in the late fall, and then back down the coast of Spain and the Canaries and back home again. And you're going to see quite a few pictures of this. Just to introduce you to the crew, that's me on the right, and that's my daughter Samantha on the left. This picture was taken in the British Virgin Islands. Samantha, the whole family was very keen on scuba diving. And there's a picture of Andy and Jamie just celebrating with a cigar, making it over to Europe. I tell you what, having children grow up on a boat is the best thing you can do for yourselves and for your children. I'll tell you, it's just wonderful. So this is just leaving Fort Lauderdale. We've got a kind of a moderate calm breeze here, and we're on our way. The boat that you see on deck behind the mast there is a 2-piece 12-foot, sort of like a dory that you can put together. But on top of it, you'll see a deflated Zodiac, not Zodiac, I'm sorry, it was a Carib 10, so that we could have either the rowing boat, the beautiful rowing boat, or we could have the high-speed rib to get around. You'll see in many more pictures, you'll see we have a boom gallows. Why every boat built today doesn't have a boom gallows is beyond me. You'll see my antenna back there. That's for my ham radio. You'll see those solar panels that articulate. We can turn them so that they're perpendicular to the sun. And of course, storing our extra fuel on deck. We would never stow extra fuel along the lifelines or the stanchions, but inboard. And of course, the downwind pole stored up the mast. But that's a whole nother seminar. So we get going, we're out in the middle of the Atlantic heading towards Bermuda, and what happens? Look at this sea. The wind drops, there's nothing there. So up goes our half-ounce spinnaker with 2 spinnaker poles. heading directly for Bermuda. A half-ounce spinnaker is marvelous when you're in calm weather. I mean, you can be doing 4 to 5 knots and you can't even see a ripple on the sea. And then, of course, the wind picked up. The wind always does eventually pick up. And then we put our 3/4 ounce spinnaker up, heading directly for Bermuda once again. And finally, you know, the wind gets just up over 15 knots or something. And then, of course, we pulled out the Genoa. And you can see the forward hatch is still open. I mean, this is in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, somewhere between the Bahamas and Bermuda. It was still so calm, but the wind had come up and we were romping on our way to Bermuda. By the way, I just want you to see one other thing. You see the track up the mast on the port side there? That is a dedicated storm trysail track that we often used because it was so much easier just to drop the mainsail, gasket the mainsail, and have, you'll see a picture later on of the trysail all ready to go, just to be already on the track. And all you have to do is take the halyard off the mainsail, put the halyard onto the trysail. And anyone who's been to Bermuda knows that what you look for is that little white pencil on the horizon, knowing that you're getting closer and closer to Bermuda. Gibbs Hill Lighthouse is just the most wonderful thing for making a landfall coming from the south and west like we were. And of course, the closer you get to, the more beautiful it is. By the way, all the rest of the pictures in Bermuda were on film from that Nikon's camera. And I was up there in the lighthouse changing film, and I dropped the roll and it fell down. And then the whole family went and looked for it like an Easter egg hunt. We couldn't find it. There is a wonderful little tea house there. We went in for scones and jam and clotted cream. And some lady came in and said, did anybody lose their film? We found this roll of film out there. So these pictures are compliments of the woman who found it when we couldn't. And then here we are in Bermuda, making our landfall. It was this passage when we were taking the children to school was very late in the year. As a matter of fact, all the other boats had left already, because for those of you who've been here, you know that the boats are rafted up almost all the way across here at St. George's. We came in the middle of July, and here we are, the only boat checking in, which was terrific. And then launching the boat Samantha, here we are launching a little dory, because we used to love rowing the dory in. That's, just forget the telephone. Ocean Sails is the best place to go. Suzanne and Steve Hollis own this company. It's, of course, a sailmaker. They're riggers. They take your mail. They'll get anything for you from the States. When I worked at West Marine for that 22 years, I would supply them with so many things from West Marine for the boats that were anchored in St. George's. If you ever get to Bermuda, please say hello to Suzanne and Steve for me, because they became very dear friends. And I just love them, and they do everything for the yachtsmen. So here we are looking down in Georgetown, and look at how few boats are there. For those of you who have transited across the Atlantic, leaving Bermuda behind, you'll know that this is a pretty empty site, because normally there would be boats you could almost walk across. And this is from Gibbs Hill Light just before I dropped the film. So you can see Bermuda isn't one island, it's a whole bunch of little beautiful islands. And the diving there is superb. And the beaches there, especially on, I guess it would be the south side of the island, are just spectacular. You can see Samantha doesn't like them much. And then there's a bunch of little islands right inside Hamilton Harbor. And during the week, you can anchor here and almost be all by yourself. But on the weekends, you have to get out because it's absolutely mobbed with boats. And this cemetery here is very interesting, because this was all Boer war prisoners of war that were taken from Africa and brought here to be prisoners. And all these young men, there wasn't one headstone there that was over 20 years old. All of them died from influenza when they got to Bermuda. Pretty sobering. Of course, you rent mopeds to drive around the island, and beware, because with an outboard motor, to go faster, you go like this, and to slow down, you go like this. Well, mopeds are just the opposite. And of course, I was so used to an outboard motor that when I wanted to stop, I zoomed ahead, and when I wanted to zoom ahead, I would stop. And I literally went like this all the way around the island because I was so used to the outboard motor, and I kept trying to remember that on these mopeds it's just the opposite. And here's a gas station. Oh, I mean, is this not a beautiful place to work? This is a gas station in Bermuda. Love it. And we hated leaving Bermuda, but then we followed the rising sun across the Atlantic with the two children, of course, bound for the Azores. It's about 1,800 miles to Flores, which is where we always love to stop first. Now, go back a little bit to 1972 on my honeymoon on the little boat Carronade, and going to the Cafe Sport. I guess the next time I went to the Cafe Sport was in 1997. We found the logbook entry of Carronade there in 1972, July 5th of 1972, when we were bound for England on my honeymoon on that little tiny boat. And that's a picture of Horta back in 1972 with just the one harbor. You'll see there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 boats. Those are 6 transatlantic boats. That's it that ever came into the harbor. You had to moor alongside the horrible, yucky seawall unless you wanted to anchor out in the middle of the harbor in 30 or 40 feet of water. So those of you who've been to Horta, that's what it was like in 1972 with gorgeous Pico in the background. And back then they were still whaling because whaling was one means of income that people had, and also having food for the winter. And we went down. What happens is there are outposts all around the island of Fayal, and when they spot sperm whales, a gun goes off. And if it's on the other side of the island, another gun picks it up, so that by the time the gunshot goes off in Horta, where the boats are kept, the whale boats, all the whalers run down to their boats. There were 5 boats at that time, and get towed out by a steamboat. It was a steamboat, get towed out to where they saw the whales. And one of the boats was short a man, and they looked around. There was a lot of natives, because there weren't too many yachtsmen there in those days, looking around. And Andy was the tallest, kind of, I guess, dumbest looking one. And they pointed to him and pointed to the boat, and he went, "Me?" Yeah. And he got in the boat, and he was able to go out, but he ran back to our boat to get his Nikon's camera, because he couldn't believe that he was actually going to be able to go out on a whale boat. And here he is just taking a picture of one of the other boats. I'm going to show you just a couple of pictures. I mean, I don't like killing whales, and I would never do it today, and I would never want other people to do it today. But in those days, these people relied on maybe 4 or 5 whales a year to support them with food and income. And look at how they had to get them in these sailing boats. By the way, that mast is on a tabernacle, and once they hook the whale, the whole sail has to come down as they go on the Nantucket sleigh ride. I mean, it's just, Andy describes it in my logbook in about 6 pages. I'd love to print that log and send it to you, Simon, of what it's like to be on a whaling boat back then.
I think that'd be a great article for Flying Fish, actually, Pam.
Pardon me?
That'd be a great article for Flying Fish.
It would. You know what? I'll do it.
Yeah.
Good idea. So here they are with the sail up. See how some of the sails are even torn. and they're looking for the whale, and the man in the bow is the one who just, it's not that he doesn't kill the whale, he's just hooks the whale. That you can't see the end of the harpoon, but that's what just catches the whale. It's got a hook on it, so it catches the whale. And of course, I'm not going to stay in this picture, but all the crew are the ones that have to clean the whale. For those of you who've been to Horta, you know that the whaling station is still there, just around the corner here from the harbor. And of course, Andy had to get in there with all of them and do what they have to do. Anyway, this is Horta in 1997. Now the harbor has been built. The inner harbor has been built. You can see the boats rafted off the seawall. You can see the outer seawall where we first had to lay in Kandarik, and of course, gorgeous Pico in the background. And this is this is so cool. We made our third landfall on Horta the day of the Semana del Mar, which is the big festival of the sea. And of course, everybody had to dress ship for the festival of the sea. It lasted for a week. It was so marvelous to get there in time. And there you can just see Kandarik. She's kind of off to the right a little bit. We hadn't put our flags up, but we were going to, because we had just come in coming from Flores. And then these are the two people, like Steve and Suzanne in Bermuda, Duncan and Ruthie Sweet at Mays Mid-Atlantic Yacht Services. They are the best friends you'll have there. They do everything for the cruising yachtsmen, including fresh bread, fresh eggs from the countryside, mail. We had a problem with our profile. One of the fasteners in the bottom of the profile, you know, the little blue screws that had just come out, and we tried to call up Profurl to get something sent to us to get a new one. Went into Mid-Atlantic and they had a whole box of them. I mean, they have everything a yacht would need, and they are my best friends. And if anybody ever goes there from someplace that has Triscuits and jalapenos in plastic jars, you have to promise me you will take a box of Triscuits and a jar of jalapenos and give them to Ruthie and Duncan from Pam, okay? And I'll tell you what, they'll be your best friends forever. They're wonderful, just such great people. These are the streets, the beautiful cobblestone streets and the wonderful architecture, Portuguese architecture in Horta. And Samantha loved this little square. This was close to the bread shop, the hot bread shop. And if the bread hadn't come out of the oven yet, we'd have to wait a little bit to get it. And this is Highway 1 up near the Caldera in Horta with all the hydrangeas out. I mean, it's kind of good to go late in the year to Horta rather than earlier in the year, because at the end of July, the beginning of August is when all the hydrangeas come out. Look at that. I mean, it's just spectacular. And of course, even the cows like it. I mean, their hedges, see the hedges? The hedges are made of hydrangeas. So the cows can come through them, you know, if they want to. And look at that one cow, she's ready to be milked. I think it's so much fun to see them going home in the afternoon to get milked. And then you see a lot of these boats. These are the local fishermen's boats, and they go down these ramps every day fishing, and they come back up. And you'll see the big post on the outside there. That's if it's too rough to haul the boats out, like, you know, by pulling them up. They use that as a crane and pull them up that way. And I want to tell you something, those boats are so heavy because they're wooden boats. It's amazing that what they can do with them. And they go out in all kinds of weather. And, you know, there was a terribly strong volcanic eruption on Horta. And not only was there an eruption, but a part of the island fell into the sea during the sort of the quake of it. Now there's Samantha showing where what used to be land is now just going into the sea. And there's Jamie actually standing on the roof of the old lighthouse keeper's house because of all the ash that covered the single-story lighthouse keeper's house. I mean, it's amazing. That's when a lot of the Portuguese Azorian people came to like Rhode Island and things, and became the wonderful farmers that Rhode Island and the Northeast has as well. And then, of course, everybody has to put their name somewhere on the wall. The only place we could find was right here. So the kids spent a long, long time making this very beautiful Kandarik. And that was back in 1987 when we were sailing the kids back over to school. And of course, every time I know of someone going to Horta, I ask them to please make sure it's still there and nobody has gone over it, and to, make sure that it's looking okay. So Andy and I came back in 2006. That was going over again. And you can see we put the 2006, but somebody had come, I don't know who it was, but they had refreshed it for us, which is very nice of them. And then it's a funny story, but another time we were on our way over to Europe and we stopped in my favorite island of all, Terceira, and we went into Praia de Victoria, which is the harbor there. And we just fell in love with the island. And instead of heading off to Portugal in October, November, like we had planned on doing, we decided to leave the boat here in Terceira. And there she is getting ready for us to leave. And the airport is like a 5-minute drive from the marina. And in those days, I have to tell you that the round trip fare from the airport right to Providence, Rhode Island was $400 round trip. I doubt that it's like that now, but we went home for the whole winter. That's when we put a lot of Canberra gel aboard the boat, Simon, and came back and the boat was perfect, just perfect. Came back the next April and continued further east. And so we decided to go up to Ireland. And, because I'm from Florida, I get cold easily. So our Bimini top and our Dodger can be totally enclosed capsule with these zippered plastic curtains. And there I am steering in a squall. The lines that you see coming out of the self-steering lines, but in a heavy squall, we usually steer in case the wind direction changes. But we're on our way to Ireland in this picture. And by the way, once we got to Ireland, and it was cold for us, this cockpit was so warm because it was kind of like a little, greenhouse for us. It was wonderful when we were up there because we didn't get up to Ireland till late in October. There we are screaming along. You can see how low the sun is because of how the solar panels are so far up. That's about at noon, and that sun is really low. And we're just screaming along, wing and wing, on our way to Ireland, making our landfall. Who recognizes that lighthouse? Oh, I can't. Oh, that's right. This isn't. Okay, there's no chats. Okay, never mind. Anyway, Ireland is so beautiful, and this rainbow greeted us as we came in. And these fishing boats, look at all the beautiful colors that they are. The only thing wrong with going to Ireland so late in the year from the Azores was the fog. And we had this beautiful sort of rosy pink and purple spinnaker on purpose. Andy had it made on purpose because in fog, he wanted to be seen if we were flying the spinnaker. And honest to goodness, most of the passage from Horta to Ireland was in pea soup, light, downwind sailing with that spinnaker up. And honestly, we could hear their doors slamming. We could smell their cigarettes. and we never saw them, never saw them. So I'll tell you what, it was a little heart stopping sailing through that fog. And at one point in the fog, I think I told the story of the boom, boom. And it was that supersonic transport coming over us from Paris, going over to the United States. But I'm not going to tell that story again because you all heard it already. And then the towns were kind of like the boats. All these beautiful little towns had all the different color homes. It was just enchanting. And roses everywhere. And I know why they had so many roses, because it was so damp and cold. Of course, we were there very late in the year. Out in the countryside, all the houses were white with black roofs, but it was so beautiful. And this is a harbor that in the summertime, we saw a picture at the local pub where there were so many boats anchored here. You could walk across the boats to get to shore. And we were the only yacht there because we were so late in the year. And I think that we were told we were very, very lucky that the sun was out for a lot of the time that we were there. This old church. And, you know, we were told that in that church, there were so many people buried from the potato famine, and there would be whole families buried in the same hole. And, you know, a good lesson for my children, who were pretty young adults by that time, how lucky we are to live in the time that we live in. And then for those of you who recognize, this is Bantry Castle and a beautiful anchorage. I can't remember where this is, but I do remember I was cold here and we were sitting aboard the boat having a cup of tea, and all these women in bathing suits came and swam around the boat and were talking to us. And I wanted to put my big toe in the water, and they were swimming and having a wonderful time. But beautiful. It could be absolutely beautiful there too. And it could be absolutely miserable there too, like this. Lovely. And finally, we left Ireland. It was very cold. It was like the middle of November. And we made our first landfall, of course, in the Gulf of Morbihan, where we saw our children. And then we came here to La Crueste. And all of a sudden, it was warm again. We don't know why, but it was beautiful, beautiful weather. And a Frenchman came and gave us these crabs. And of course, I didn't know what to do with them. They were so big. And he goes to me, oof! And he takes the crabs from me and he says, come to dinner on my boat. And we became best friends. And it was much better to have a French crab than an American disaster, I should say. And then this is in Vannes. This is where my children were in school. This is the fabulous place that we talked about. And one of you wrote me back and said that you actually hit the top of the weir when you were coming in. And also another one that a great big catamaran came in here spinning around and everything. I can understand you being worried because it's very, very crowded there. But it's absolutely enchanting. I'll just give you a few pictures for those of you who haven't been there. It's just like something that Walt Disney would have tried to create and couldn't have created as beautifully. And then on to Mont Saint-Michel. We didn't sail there. We rented a car to drive there. It's someplace I've always wanted to go. And I have a hint for you. If you go to Mont Saint-Michel during the day, it is so crowded that you have to walk down the narrow streets kind of like this with the tourists. But if you spend the night there, they all leave and you have the whole Mont Saint-Michel to yourself. And I want to tell you, it is kind of like being in a fairy tale to be there and walk those streets at night and be the only one walking the streets, and an occasional restaurant will be open. And the only problem is the rooms were the old rooms that the monks lived in. And Andy, being 6'3", had to duck down to get into our bedroom at night. And of course, I could walk straight in because that was no problem. But go there at night instead of during the day. And then this is scooting along down the Bay of Biscay, probably one of the wildest passages I've ever had the one time. I mean, I have never been in a full gale for so long, running downwind, luckily, as when we went down to the north coast of Spain. There's a lot of stories about that, but I'll tell them another time. But here we are down on the north coast of Spain and looking at these little tiny fishing boats that would go out every day, a couple of miles from shore, just to do their fishing to survive. I love the oar locks on them. They're just big posts where the oars go. They have a hole in them. I have a hole, of course, to be able to row with. They don't have any engines whatsoever. And then because it was so late in the year, everybody was saying, oh my God, Cape Finisterre, oh my God, you're going to have the worst passage. I mean, that is going to, you know, that's the local Cape Horn, everything. So we get to Cape Finisterre. We've got the trysail ready to go. We've got the storm staysail ready to put up. And it's a beautiful day going around Cape Finisterre. We had to power around Cape Finisterre. On to Bayona. For those of you who've been here, this yacht club is the most fabulous yacht club. So friendly, so welcoming, hot showers, delicious meals, just fabulous place. I just loved it. Of course, I loved Bayona itself. And I think I splurged so much on the clementines there, such great clementines. And we bought a barrel of clementines to sail back across the Atlantic on, but they never even lasted as far as the Canary Islands because they were so delicious. And I remember the first store I went into and I asked for chicken, and she brought out this chicken with its legs and flapping wings and everything. And I said, no, I just want a chicken to cook tonight. And they held up this chicken. And I said, oh, thank you. And I ran out and I had to ask Andy to go and get the chicken because I just couldn't bear the thought of it. Anyway, going down the coast, screaming down the coast. You know, they call that the trade winds, going downwind down that coast of Portugal and into, I loved it here so much. Going into Portugal and see, this is the Monument of the Americas, and that's Christopher Columbus on the bow. And when you're going in, the river, I think it's called the Tagus River, as I recall, and you see that from a distance, you think it's some huge big sailboat that's aground or something like that until you get up close. Lisbon is just fantastic. There it is, kind of up close. I wish I could talk to people and ask, did you go there? Because it's so neat. And then, of course, there's this bridge here. It's kind of like the Golden Gate. And the first marina we stopped at was right underneath that. And because there's so much traffic, it sounded like bees were buzzing all around all the time. And we couldn't stand the noise. So we went really further up the Tagus River and found a better place to moor. And this monastery, this monastery is so old and everything had to be carved by hand. And I'm looking at it saying, how did they do this? How did they do this? I mean, it was so beautiful. And if you haven't been to the Coach Museum, you've got to go to the Coach Museum in Lisbon, because there are all these coaches, you know, one coach is gold, one coach is silver. If it has diamonds in it, the next one has diamonds and rubies in it. I mean, it is the most fascinating museum. It used to be the stable, I think the Palace Stable or something like that. But now it's got all these fabulous coaches in it like this. And of course, just getting lost in the city of Lisbon, beautiful. And then going back out and going around Cape St. Vincent, out into the Atlantic Ocean. No, I'm sorry, this is coming down around Cape St. Vincent and coming into Lagos. Sorry, this is being left to port as you're coming into into the bottom of Portugal. And we spent a good month in Lagos because we loved it so much. And here we are leaving to go down to the Canary Islands. It's now well past Christmas. And as you can see, that blue bag on deck there is just forward of the dinghies, but after the mast, that's got our storm trysail already on that track I was telling you about. The sheets are in it, pre-marked of where they go, you know, on either side of the boom. And you can see Andy has also put on the removable inner forestay staysail, because we were expecting really bad weather because it was so late in the year. But here we are saying goodbye to Lagos, which was a wonderful place. Now, another year when we came back here, we left the boat there for a year, but this was another time when we just stayed a month and then left. And what happened, we got out there heading down the coast and then heading over towards the Canary Islands, and we had the spinnaker up. Here's our same spinnaker that we used on the way up to Ireland with the bright colors. But look how it's faded because we used it so much. But you can ask me, how did you get that picture? Because there were no drones in those days. We were sailing in company with another boat that had a family aboard. And they took that picture of us. So I have them to thank for us. And then as the wind picked up and we were coming down the coast of Gran Canary, it was just the most beautiful ride, wing and wing. And we stopped at Lanzarote. Lanzarote was our favorite island. By the way, this is a vineyard. These are bubbles of lava that hardened. And inside each one of the bubbles is a vine of grapes. And this is a vineyard where they hydrate the vines by the condensation at night, because it's really hot during the day, but at night it gets really cold. And the condensation, Mother Nature takes care of irrigating this vineyard. And Andy said the wine was delicious. I think I told you that before. And then the camel ride up to the top of the caldera where we had dinner. And the dinner was cooked on actually open fire grills that were surrounding the caldera. And then onto Manrique's, one of Manrique's gorgeous houses. This is a tidal swimming pool. So the tide comes up and the tide goes down. He built a tunnel all the way to the sea, just so that this pool could be fed with the tide. And what you can't see, but behind these palm trees is an auditorium that was blasted out of the lava. And all the seats were cut, the stage was cut, and apparently it's got the most perfect acoustics for music. And this was one of the favorite places of the opera singers to come and sing deep down in this auditorium that was blasted out of lava. And then another cliff, we're looking down on Gracioso. And just as I was taking a picture with the Nikon's camera, this guy was flying past. I think he was as surprised as I was, but I was able to click it fast enough. And then on to Portamogan, where all the race boats were. And look how tiny Kandarik looks in there with all the boats there. I didn't like it there very much, but we made a stop to fuel up and to get as much food as we could, because next stop would be Antigua. And Samantha's boyfriend and Samantha decided to sail back across the Atlantic with us from France. So they came and met us, and there's Samantha's boyfriend learning how to celestial navigate from Andy, and he was pretty good. And look at the spinnaker. Look how the spinnaker has, again, faded even more because we used it so much going downwind. And see also at sea, the forward hatch is open. It was just a lovely passage back across the Atlantic into, how many people recognize this? English Harbor, the Admiral's Inn, Montserrat, one of the old sugar cane plantations. And then the most disappointing thing was going back to St. Bart's, because the last time we had been in St. Bart's was in 1972, before we were married on Little Carronade. Nobody anchored out because there was only like 4 boats in the harbor. And when we came back, sailing boats could not even get into Gustavia because of all the mega yachts. You weren't allowed in there. You had to anchor out here. And it was so disappointing. The big cruise ships would just belch out passengers, and the passengers would rent these little sort of like Jeeps. I mean, the whole place had changed so much since 1972 that we didn't stay there. So that's what it was like when we arrived and couldn't get in. And this is what it was like back in 1972 when everybody anchored. And of course, the airport is the most terrifying one, because the airplanes comes right down this road, and then they land, and then they have to stop before they go into the bay. But it's kind of fun to watch them coming in and taking off. So we just went a couple of miles away to Ilfors, which is just about 3 or 4 miles away. And as you can see, we were the only boat anchored there. Just looking down from the top into Ilfors. And then into the crazy St. Martin's Pond, where the mega yachts were. I mean, I've never seen so many mega yachts. We went around to the other side, to the French side, which was very rolly, but at least you could anchor there. And then on to the Virgin Islands. Again, there's that spinnaker. Look at the color of the spinnaker. Know how much we used it. And then look at what it was like when it was brand new. Just to show you, people who don't carry spinnakers, I'll tell you what, they're just marvelous. And then on to the beautiful Virgin Islands that we love so much, the British Virgin Islands. For those of you who've been there, you'll recognize this as Gorda Sound. We got into Gorda Sound, and we had all these slides. In those days, we had made slides. And you can see Bitter End off there to the right. And we went ashore there. It's one of my favorite places. Amy and I went there in 1972, and all they had was a restaurant there, and we had hamburgers, and they were $10 each. And we thought, we've never spent so much money on a hamburger in our whole lives. And so when we went back, it was quite different, quite lovely. And Gordo, for those of you who might have remembered Gordo, was the waterfront manager. And we told him we had just finished crossing the Atlantic. And I said to him, I have a whole bunch of slides. Do you want me to give a presentation in your little theater that you have? And he said, well, what do you want to be paid for? And I said, oh, I don't want to be paid, but I'd like 4 dinners for people, 4 dinners for us. He said, done. So we had 4 dinners, and I gave my very first slideshow presentation there. And that's what started me realizing how much I love sharing what I've had with other people. By the way, he asked me to come back the next weekend, and I said, I'm going to have to charge you the same thing. He said, done. And we got 4 more meals, and I gave another slide presentation, and it was just packed there. And I tell you what, it's kind of been the one thing that has kept me going for so long, is being able to share my experiences with you. That's, of course, just sitting on the beach there at the beautiful Bitter End Yacht Club. By the way, they're coming back. You know, they were destroyed in the terrible hurricane. I used to teach there for 12 years. I was a teacher there at Women on the Water Week. They had a fleet of little, beautiful little Rhodes 19s. And I would go down there for a week, actually 2 weeks. I'd spend 1 week to myself, for 1 week of teaching women how to sail there. And it was just the most wonderful experience for me to be able to have these frightened women know what they were doing, enjoy it, and be good sailors within a week of women teaching women how to sail in little keel boats. And of course, Samantha would always want to come with me because I got a room there. That was my payment, being able to have a gorgeous little bungalow and have all the meals I wanted. That was my payment. And it was so well received by me. It was so much fun for those 12 years. And of course, this is diving on the Rhone. The whole family, except for me, are scuba divers. I like to snorkel, but I don't like to scuba dive. So Andy and Samantha and Jamie used to go down all the time. And then on to Luperon. This is the funniest little place. Getting in here is quite tricky, but once you're inside, it's this great big lagoon. It's gorgeous. And you can see all the boats that are anchored here. This is in the Dominican Republic, by the way. I'm sorry, I didn't mention that. And this is Main Street. You'll see that the dairy is on the left-hand side of the street and the laundromat is on the right side of the street. And someone wrote to me, I'm going to write them back and thank them, to say the cows still just walk down the middle of the street in Luperon. Thank goodness it's still the same. It was so much fun there. And then on to Georgetown. We got to Georgetown. We never knew it, but it was the Out Island Regatta, and it was just packed with boats. I can remember being anchored here inside this little sandbar, all by ourselves, not another boat for weeks at a time. And when we came in on Kandarik, that was on Carronade. And when we came in on Kandarik, we could hardly find a place to drop our anchor. But it was still fun to see the Out Island Regatta, something everybody should see at one time or another. Now, I'm going to show you some pictures that interest me and I hope interested you. This is Kandarik, 48 years old. I keep her in mint condition, like her builder, Andy, would want me to. I've lost Andy and I've lost Samantha, but they're up in the clouds and they're looking down on us. And Jamie and I use this boat every weekend. We keep it down on Biscayne Bay. And it's the only time in our lives, I think I told you this before, where Jamie and I are truly at peace with ourselves. And I want to show you what Jamie has done to the interior. This is all the wood, all the white paint, everything has been redone by Kathy Puskarich here in Fort Lauderdale. I don't know if you remember those pictures in the beginning, but everything in the boat was stripped down to bare wood, and Kathy has redone everything on the boat to keep it looking beautiful. And I thank her so much. And we put new cushions on. Kathy repainted the little pot-bellied stove that was getting a little rusty. Jamie put a big TV on. And I have to admit, and please, God forgive me, but I gave away my 48-year-old Groco K toilet and put in a Raritan Elegance push button toilet because it was 35 strokes to get that Groco empty, all the hoses empty, and now I just push a button. So getting older, it's easier. And I just want you to see how beautiful the boat is because I'm so proud of her. And I'm going to end with saying the best place for anyone in the world is behind the helm of their sailboats. I don't care if they're going across an estuary, across a tiny lake, or across a big ocean. It's still the most wonderful feeling in the world to be on a sailing boat and to have that boat take care of you because you take care of her. I want to thank all of you for coming back. I'm so happy that some of you were with us a week ago. And Simon, thank you for inviting me. And I hope you enjoyed the pictures Maybe next time I should just tell more stories because there's so many to tell. But I'm so pleased that I could be here today. Thank you.
That was lovely. I'm just going to nip next door because there's a bit of background noise. So bear with me a moment.
Okay.
There we go. A bit quieter in here. Thank you very much. That was a very different talk to your talk 6 days ago, which you did spontaneously without slides, without cues, but your photographic memory of the events of 40 years ago is really quite extraordinary, and you tell it beautifully. And I was delighted to see so much great feedback that you got from your talk last Thursday. It's a shame that the slides weren't working that particular night, but they've worked well tonight, and it's been a lovely tale. Thank you very much indeed, Pam.
Well, thank you. And I want to thank all the people who did persevere with us the other night, and to also let them know that I am in the process of writing you back, all of you, because remember, I asked for pen pals, and I hope that I'll get to all of you pretty soon, but it's been a pretty hectic week for me. But I am planning on doing that. And if anybody has any comments about this, I'd love to get back in touch with you. And Flipper, if you're watching, thank you for all your wonderful experiences as well. It's been great to get to know you and to know what you've been through in your life. It's pretty incredible. And Simon, you're just wonderful. Thank you so much.
Well, Pam, we've got tomorrow night we're talking about the Scilly Islands with Tim Good. So hopefully I'll have this up and posted on the website by then, and I will try and steer people back to it, so they'll have a very different experience to the experience of Thursday night, last Thursday night. But great talk, and your boat is gorgeous, Pam. The boat of 48 years, I think you said. It's absolutely beautiful. Fantastic. You must be very proud of it.
I have to keep it the way Andy would want it. Okay. And Andy kept it. I have to tell you about the Scilly Isles, though. It's kind of a funny story. Do you have a second?
Yeah, of course.
When we left Ireland, we left from Kinsale to take the kids down to Vaughan. And again, it was very late. It was very late in November. And we were going to stop. We really wanted to stop at the Scilly Isles. And let me tell you, it was the worst, most horrible passage, because it was wet, it was foggy, it was rainy, and it was blowing a gale. And he said to me, as a matter of fact, we had that enclosure up, and just to keep us from freezing, and you have to poke your head out to see what the wind was really doing, because it was awful. And he said, I want to see those Scilly Isles, but not in weather like this. And we kept going. And as soon as we got around Ushant, this is what was so crazy. The minute we got around Ushant, it was sunny and warm.
Amazing. Yeah.
And we had to power into into La Crueste, where we checked it. We had to power. It was so different. Just that little bit of Brittany sticking out, Yeah. It was so weird.
Yeah, no, those kind of southwest approaches, there's a lot of tide coming down through the Bristol Channel and the Irish Sea, and often the wind's against the tide, and it can be pretty unpleasant sailing south.
Yeah. I think I told the stories of listening to other boats on the radio as we were going around Ushant. Did I tell those stories? I think about one boat calling me up and said, and they asked me if I was Pam from West Marina. Because, when you go around Ushant, you've got to tell them that you're coming, so that they tell you whether to slow down or speed up because of the ships going back and forth. And somebody called me up, because everybody's listening on the VHF radio, and said, are you Pam from West Marina?
You didn't tell us that.
I said, yes, I am. Why? I recognize your voice. And I said, you recognize my voice? And he said, yes. He said, you don't remember me, but I'm on something like a 120-foot sloop, and you helped me tremendously when I was in Fort Lauderdale. And I said, I did. I mean, and this was in pea soup, howling gale conditions. You know what I mean? And he kept saying, will you get off the radio and come up here? You know, I need you, because we couldn't see a thing, you know. And I kept talking to this guy. It was so funny. And Andy was furious at me because I wouldn't get off the VHF radio. So funny. So funny.
It's a fantastic story, Pam, and a great tale and a great, well, a moving story of the losses of your daughter and your husband, and 40 years of the pleasures of sailing. Fantastic, wonderful.
I've been a very, 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 very lucky person.
Yeah.
Very lucky. And you know what? You keep me lucky by being able to share this. Okay. Thank you.
Well, I think you'll get a lot of hits when we put it out there. So I hope people enjoy it. And I'll sign off and say good night. Good night,
and tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night.
What time? To the Scilly Isles.
8 o'clock UTC. So same.
So it'll be 3 o'clock.
3 o'clock at 3 o'clock in Florida, and the guy that will be talking will be Tim Good and his partner Emmy. Can't pronounce his surname; it's very Dutch. And they spent this summer cruising and helping them write the guidebook for the cities. And Tim's a rock climber, and Emmy is the most fantastic multimedia artist. So I'm guessing that there'll be a lot of artwork and a lot of shoreside adventures, as well as cruising information about the cities tomorrow, which you missed out on. So you have to rectify.
I hope so. But tomorrow is Thanksgiving.
Oh, heck yeah!
I hope I can be there though.
Well, fingers crossed. It'll be videoed, so you can always play it back off the website. I'll put this video up on the website probably in the next 24 hours or so, Pam, so you can direct people towards it.
Okay, great.
But lovely to chat. Lovely to chat again.
You're going to send out a notice though, so that okay.
Yeah, no, I'll make
People
sure.
know when it's there.
I'll make sure everybody knows about
When
it.
it's up, I mean, just when it's up. Yeah.
Great.
Well, thank you so much. If you were having Thanksgiving, I'd wish you a happy Thanksgiving, but I don't think you have that over there.
We had Thanksgiving in Canada about 6 weeks ago. That was our first Thanksgiving.
Right, okay.
And we were invited to the home of Terry and Peter, who are the port officers in Mahone Bay, and they cooked us turkey and fresh cranberries. So we know all about Thanksgiving.
Oh yes. Well, you know. I want to tell you what I thought was interesting about the attendees was where they were all from so far away and so close by and so far away. You know, that you must be very proud, I hope, of the OCC and how you've reached out to so many people around the world. And I was fascinated with all those countries, you know.
I think it's most webinars we've done reach between 20 and 26 countries, which is extraordinary.
Unbelievable.
And people from completely different time zones. So you had a few people from Australia online last week, a lot from all over Europe, Switzerland, Poland, and of course the people that are cruising. There was a lot of people dialing in from, I think, from French Polynesia and from the Caribbean and from Lagos and all over. So yeah, no, it's great fun and it brings people together. And quite a lot of them are not Ocean Cruising OCC members, which is even better because it's flying the flying fish and letting everybody know what the OCC is all about. And your stories of wandering around the North Atlantic. Brilliant. Lovely to chat again. And thank you very much for taking
the time
to come back and do the redo. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Now, thank you for your time. And now you can go to bed on time.
That's all right. Good night, Pam. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.